And good morning. It's Wednesday, August 6th. You're listening to the Red Sea Roundup. I'm your host, Deacon Mike Beauvais, and I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Today, as always, we're going to have a great show for you. We're going to be talking with Garrett Hines, and we're going to be talking about iconography. So if you have no idea what iconography is, stay tuned. You're going to find out. Garrett, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Deacon Mike. I am great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm going to enjoy this. And now, first question I always ask when somebody comes on the show is tell us a little bit about your faith journey.
Okay. The short version, grew up Protestant. My wife and I grew up in the Church of Christ. And then somewhere in our kind of mid-20s, had a moment of like, oh, I think there's more. We had attended a retreat, and that opened our eyes to this idea that there's probably more of God than what we had been taught in, kind of the insular way we had grown up. And that put us on a journey. We joined an evangelical church in our 30s, and we did that for a while and became Protestant missionaries to Southeast Asia. That experience, unfortunately, really, really bad. And we came home pretty broken. And in the midst of that brokenness, we were open to the possibility of like, maybe this is not where we were supposed to be. And we ended up going to Colorado for a counseling program that was going to help us kind of get back on track. And in the midst of that, our counselor said, you really should try liturgical church. There's a lot of healing that can happen in liturgical church. And we were like, what is that? And he said, well, I think you should go try a Catholic church. And we said, no, we can't do that. We're good, solid Protestants. And so, but we did. And while we were in that Catholic parish, the priest gave his homily, and he said a bunch of things that were as if our counselor had written our story and handed it to him, because it spoke right to our hearts. And so we came home, we tried a bunch of other Protestant churches, and then COVID happened, and we quit going to church, kind of like everybody else. And in the midst of that, I started to explore some of the Catholic teachings that I kind of bumped up against in the midst of that. And the first argument for me, which is funny now as an iconographer, was the praying to the saints. And is that logical? Is it rational? Should we be doing that? And found it to be completely like, oh, this makes a whole lot of sense. Why don't we do that? So I started praying and asking the saints to pray over my kids at night. I didn't tell my wife that I was doing it. And a couple of years later, after a lot of reading and a lot of study and a lot of arguing with Father Mike Schmitz in my head, we made the decision to attend a Catholic parish here in town. And that led to us joining RCIA. And then we converted in January on the Feast of Epiphany, and that was about 3 years ago. So
now, you were talking about arguing with Father Mike in your head. I'm going to go on a limb here and say that it probably wasn't very successful.
No, not at all. And it's funny to think about it now, because I wasn't arguing with Father Mike because I thought he was wrong. I was mad at Father Mike for being so happy when I was in a really unhappy place. And it wasn't that he was wrong, it's that I wasn't glad that he was right. Yeah.
That brings me to something that you had mentioned in your bio on your website. And I'm going to paraphrase here, that in a way, art can be a refuge for the low points in your life.
Absolutely.
And, you were just describing that in part, liturgical church is also a refuge in low points in your life. And I would argue possibly for the same reason, because the beauty, the expression of faith in liturgy,
that's right,
has a lot to do with the same thing that we do with art.
Yeah, that's very true. Absolutely.
And so this sort of led you to iconography too, right? It
did, yeah. So part of our conversion journey was my cousin's a convert, and he said, "Hey man, you're thinking about the church. You should look into iconography. I think you'd really like it. It's a unique art form. You should try it out." And so I started studying a little bit and learning a little bit about what icons were, because I had no clue as a Protestant. And I started to really like, these are really interesting. And part of the journey for me was a genuine seeking of the Lord to say, okay, this isn't just about me. I'm fine if I, become Catholic, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm fine with that. But this involves my kids, and I have 2 young kids at home. And it was really important to me that I don't just lead myself and my wife into what I believe is true, but if I'm going to do this for my kids, it has to be right. And so I got into this place with the Lord in my morning prayers, and I said, okay, God, I don't know. And this is one of those like Gideon moments. I need some dry ground and a wet fleece because this is the lives of my kids. And I care about that a whole lot. And I said, I need an icon, and I'm not going to ask a soul. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not even going to tell my wife. This is between me and you, Jesus. But if somebody will give me an icon without me asking, then I know we're headed in the right place. And it's funny because we converted and nobody ever gave me an icon. However, I started to dabble in writing icons, and I did. And eventually my priest saw it, and he said, as Father Albert, who I love dearly, and he said, Garrett, I think you should learn how to do that. And I was like, Father Albert, I'm not even Catholic yet. He said, no, I think you should. And later on, he caught me after Mass, and he said, I want you to go to icon school. And with his help and a lot of his support, I was able to go to icon school and learn iconography. So yeah, that's part of the faith conversion and coming into like the liturgical rhythm of the church. Iconography is a big part of that.
Now, for those listening who have absolutely no idea what an icon is, would you explain that?
Sure. So one of the things I've really been thinking about is how to differentiate between the idea of icon and like a sacramental icon. So iconographia is the original, now I'm going to botch it, but I think it's Latin, but it means the making of an image, right? Or the writing of an image. And so, like when you go to a parish and you see a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary, that is a form of icon, because it is a holy image. However, what we're talking about is sacramental iconography, meaning it's iconography for the specific purpose of growth in prayer and holiness and connection to our Lord and his body. And so an icon is usually one of three things. It's either the singular image of our Lord or our mother, or a feastal scene, or one of his saints. So it's a painted image, typically. In ancient time, you could have had a mosaic, you could have a fresco, you could have something on a wall. But traditionally, what you see now mostly is a painted image on a board, and it's usually of a feastal scene like the Nativity or the Ascension. It might be an image of Christ, it might be an image of our mother, or it might be an image of one of his saints.
You mentioned that basically iconography is writing an image.
That's right.
And I've always found it fascinating that you don't paint icons. You write icons. That's
correct.
Would you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends a little bit on who you're talking to in terms of the icon writer. Some icon writers get really hoity-toity about it, and that's fine, I understand, and they will only accept the word write. Depending on who I'm talking to, I might say paint because it's an easier word, but you're right. To write an icon is to create a visual theological statement. So if you think about the history of the church, for the vast majority of our history, most people, most of the time, couldn't read. So if I want to tell you about Jesus, and I want to do it in a way that's going to help you remember it, I'm going to give you an image. So I'm going to write a theological statement in visual form. So words do it in one way, and visuals do it in a different way, but they're both communicating the same message. If I want to tell you that Christ is a good shepherd, I might show you the passage in Holy Scripture that tells you in words about Christ being a good shepherd. I might also write an image of Christ the Good Shepherd where he's carrying a sheep, and you see the goodness, you see the holiness in his face and in his halo and all the different robes and all the things, right? So you get this visual. And so it's a both and. But for most of the time, it was a time where we needed to communicate the truth of Scripture to people that couldn't read. So we gave them something to read that was visual. So that's why we say write. Yeah.
This is one of the things I've always found interesting about modern Christianity, especially non-Catholic, non-Eastern Rite Christianity, and the lack of knowledge of the history of Christianity, because the whole emphasis on stained glass windows, on statues, on icons, the whole point was, how do we communicate to people that don't read?
Correct.
What it is that they need to know about Jesus, about Mary, about the church, and so on.
Yeah, well, that's one of the points of iconography is it's supposed to be a part of this whole composite of things that when you enter into a church, you've left this thing that's outside. and you've entered into the thing that's actually more real than the thing you just walked out of. Because you're not to say that the sculptures and the icons and all of the architecture is it's the thing that's pointing to the real thing. The kingdom of heaven is more real than than the world you just stepped out of. And so that's what and you're right, like a lot of modern Christianity is so ambiguous. You feel like you stepped out of the world into the world.
Yes, it's Starbucks and a church.
Yeah, or an airport or a warehouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is, to me, one of my favorite topics is and I think this is important for us as Catholics to always remember also, the way churches are constructed and the art in the church are intended to remind us that the church is an extension of the kingdom of God. This is why we have a narthex or a vestibule, basically a mudroom that, we leave the outside world, we wash it off. That's the whole point of the sign of the cross with holy water, walking in. We wash off that world out there and enter into what you were saying, a more real world.
That's right.
Than what we've just left.
That's exactly right.
And I think that, this is why the artwork is so important, because it reminds us that this is different. We've entered a different space. And so I think art has so much to do with that.
Yeah, I think especially when you look at Eastern Rite churches, that's where you see kind of the ideal. Because if you walk into an Eastern Rite church and it's been done in the traditional form, you've got icons everywhere and statues everywhere, and you feel like you've walked into this place where, oh, this is what home looks like. Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about the importance of beauty in artwork and iconography? Because as an artist, you're trying to express something, but you're also trying to make sure that when you look at it, you're reminded God is beautiful, and therefore what you're doing must be.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm a little nervous because you're a deacon and you know way more than I do. So if I make a theologically incorrect statement, please correct me. But I make the argument that beauty is the transcendental on which the other two rest. Because beauty communicates across all cultures at all times, like the truly beautiful. Now, we could make an argument that maybe the Mona Lisa is beautiful to some people and not. That's not the point. The point is that beauty is the thing that will draw you up and into truth and goodness. Because if I can capture your heart, right? So that's why the world is beautiful. That's why God creates the world with beauty. Because if you go outside on a really good morning and you see one of those sunsets that just goes, it's captured you. And then it makes you think like, how on earth does that even exist? There must be something that, and that's one of the great arguments against atheism is at the end of the day, you can't tell me that came from nowhere. Just random stardust colliding. Like, no, it's entirely too beautiful. And so the purpose of beauty, the reason that our churches are beautiful is because they are supposed to capture our hearts and draw us up and into He who is beautiful. Like that God is beauty in all of its fullness. And you see that even in Christ. Like in Christ, He takes on the fullness of humanity and makes it beautiful. And so beauty in the church is supposed to entice us. It's supposed to draw us in. Because once we've been drawn in, then we can talk about truth and then we can talk about goodness. But beauty at its core is really supposed to capture the heart.
You actually touched on something that I was going to talk about in the second part of this. Today's the Feast of the Transfiguration. And talking about what you were just talking about, beauty, and the fact that beauty, the reason we consider it transcendental is because it moves us from this world to otherness. There's no explanation why beauty exists other than the fact that we all know that if we see something beautiful, there is the possibility of something of even greater beauty.
That's right.
And something of even greater beauty.
Yeah.
And if we carry that forward, where we end is God.
Yeah.
And so everything that is beautiful, ultimately, and a lot of times, people vary on, what they find beautiful. That never changes the fact, though, that beauty exists for all of us.
That's right.
in one form or another. And so that transcendental moves us ever closer to God if we are open to beauty. And this is, again, why art, music is so important in the life of human beings, because it does move us out of ourselves towards something. And if we're honest with ourselves, it's always moving us towards God.
Right. It's one of the reasons I genuinely loathe modern art. Most of contemporary art now is a celebration of ugly, or it's a celebration of that which keeps us in the state that we're currently in. It doesn't invite, like, there's a piece, and I can't remember who the artist is, but it was an installation, and it was basically, it's called Her Messy Bed. And it's just a mess, and I'm like, that's not, well, okay, you could make the argument it's art, but it's not beautiful.
Right.
And it doesn't draw me up. Like, that's why the Renaissance is so important in terms of artwork. It was a true celebration of what is beautiful. Now, not all of it was great, but the truly like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel is the epitome of beauty when it comes to Renaissance art, because it just, you go in there and someday, Lord willing, I'm going to go see it. But it pulls you up into this reality that there's something beyond all of this. And that modern art stuff, it's like, well, no, I just am as I am, and this is how it is, and when it's over, whatever.
It's more about the statement on the wall next to the art than it is the actual art,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, so much of modern art is self-appreciation rather than appreciation of the art.
Yeah.
We focus on what did the artist think.
Mm-hmm.
And that has never been the case in true art. It's always been, what is that art communicating?
Yeah.
And so, as you said, Sistine Chapel, there's no doubt what it's communicating.
Yeah.
Even David, the statue.
Yeah.
The beauty of the human form. That's not Michelangelo standing there. That's the best he could do in describing the beauty of the human form. And he did not do this so that somebody would say that's Michelangelo. He did it because he was trying to create the most beautiful shape of the human body that he could, and gave it the name of David because that was the epitome of, kingship of Christ on earth up to that point. And so I think it's really important that when we talk about art, that we always focus on the fact that true art is always oriented towards beauty and not just self-expression.
That's exactly right. And it also has this component that allows you to engage with the beauty in the way that God uniquely made you to.
Yes.
So like when you approach David, you're going to see something about the nature of God and about the nature of his creation that's uniquely for you. And I'm going to do the same thing that's uniquely for me. And that's one of the reasons, like when people ask me about a piece, so I do iconography and I do watercolor, a lot of landscape and work. And when people ask, well, what does this piece mean? I'm like, that's not for me to tell, because I want you to figure out what this piece is supposed to point you to in terms of beauty and goodness. Like, I'm not here to tell you what I think. I made the piece. I want you to engage with it and see what comes out of your heart.
That's the postmodernism seeping into the culture and everyone's interpretation of everything.
Right.
Now, when you begin a new project, where do you get your inspiration from?
Man, okay, so when I'm working in an icon, 99% of the time I'm working from whatever a patron wants to do. So, somebody will reach out and say, hey, I'd really like to do an icon of St. Augustine for my son. Okay, great. So then I will go and look at, the nice thing about being an iconographer is that you have this wide range of things that you can work from. And that's the idea in iconography, is that I'm not out there to copy somebody else's work. I'm out there to look at what has been done that I can work from. And then I'll find a piece that I feel resonates with my patron or with where I'm at as an iconographer. And then I'll start from there. And then it always starts with prayer. That's one of the big differences between just, like a print of an icon that you might buy on an online store and an icon that you get from an iconographer that's been painted by hand. So the whole thing start to finish is prayer. So there's a prayer that I say every time I sit down. There's a prayer. I'm doing my best. I'm still at a formative stage, so a lot of my focus is on the actual movement of the hand and doing things. But I'm praying while I'm writing the icon, and then when I finish that painting session, there's a little prayer. And one of the things that I do for my patrons in particular is, somebody listening to this today might reach out and say, I'd like to do an icon. I'm going to reply to their email and say, okay, hey, we've settled this. Here's what we're going to do. Now, what are you praying about? What are the things that matter to you in your life? And then I'm going to craft a prayer for them, and I'm going to write it into the border of their icon. And then before I paint it. And then when it's all painted, you won't see the prayer, but that your icon is specifically prayed over for you. And that, for me, is where I get a lot of my inspiration, is a lot of prayer, a lot of time thinking about what makes sense for this person. When I'm working on my own, it's what do I need practice on? For me, most of the time, that's a Christ-centered icon, whether it's Christ the Pantocrator, Christ the Good Shepherd. I like to work with Jesus icons. One, because I love Jesus with every fiber of my being, so why not? But really, I find those icons are the most technically difficult, and so it gives me a lot of good practice to get better as a craftsman.
I would imagine, and I have no artistic talent whatsoever, but I would imagine that when you're going to write an icon of Jesus, the thought that, I have to do my best work ever because I don't want to mess this up. And so I would think that, in that preparation as an artist, there's always part of you striving for your best when you do this.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's one of the great challenges because, as an artist, you have to be able to say, okay, where I am right now is good. And where I want to be is significantly better. And I'm not there yet. But you're exactly right, man. When I sit down to write an icon and the Blessed Mother, our Lord, a saint, feastal scene, any of them, it doesn't matter. All of them are like, oh, there's a little bit of pressure here to make this not look ugly because I want to represent the beauty of these people to the best of my ability. And I think the biggest thing that has helped me move past the fear of doing it wrong is the discipline practice. I sit down every day, Lord willing, to work on an icon, to put in time on the craft. And I've gotten to a place now where mistakes don't bother me as much. So that, if I mess up something, a skin tone or whatever, it's like, okay, I botched that, but I know how to repair it. We can move on. But yeah, there's a little bit of pressure, and especially when I'm working for somebody else. This is somebody that has decided to invest some of their hard-earned money to have a piece crafted for them. And I want to do it as much for Jesus as I do for them. Like this is not a small thing. This is really important. This is going to go in their home. Hopefully it's going to go in their kids' homes and their grandkids' homes. And this thing will get passed on forever. I want it to be the best I can make it. Yeah.
Now, we talked about inspiration. I'd like to talk a little bit about aspiration. Where would you like your work as an iconographer to take you?
Oh, man. I have a lot of goals. My wife would tell you I'm a very goal-driven person. There is a point in my life where I would like to do this full-time. I don't currently, but I want to make this my living because I think it matters to the spiritual well-being of Catholics. I think there is a real gift in iconography that I think for a while kind of got put on the shelf. And I think there's a real opportunity to help people grow spiritually through the blessing of a sacramental icon. So for one, I want an icon in every person's home. One, because I'd love to write icons. Two, because I think it would be a blessing. I also really want to help churches increase the beauty of their spaces through icons. We're in a place right now where most of the icons that I've seen in most churches are printed reproductions that they bought from an online store, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a real spiritual difference between a printed icon and an icon that has the energy of the artist in it. And I don't mean that in like a woo-woo-y way. When I sit down to paint, I'm putting energy of my work into this icon and prayer. And then to take something like that's been blessed by the priest of the parish and hang it on a wall or in the narthex or wherever, and people encounter that, there's a life that happens. And there's just a difference between a printed icon and the way a hand-painted icon glows. So like I work in egg tempera, and when egg tempera is finished, there's a glow to it. And it's just, every time I finish one, I'm like, oh, this is entirely too cool to have come from me. It's like, this is just too much fun. I almost hesitate to say my big goal. One day I would like to present an icon to the Pope that, and not for my pride and not for my ego, but because, Pope Leo is my first Pope. So we came into the church during, and I don't mean like St. Francis wasn't the Pope, it just, this is my first Pope to go start to finish. Like I was there when he was selected, and to pray for somebody and then to see the fruition of those prayers, like there's just a difference. And to be able to give a piece of my art to somebody I highly respect would be a treasure and a blessing I can't even put words to. Yeah.
And of course, if you go there to give it to the Pope, then you can go visit the Sistine
That's
Chapel.
That's exactly
too.
right. I have many plans. Yes.
You were talking a little bit about the difference between a printed icon and a written icon. And I would think that one of the benefits of a written icon by an artist is twofold. One, it's going to be unique.
That's right.
It's going to be your icon.
That's right.
But the other thing is that every artist, when they're working, they're at a different stage in their life. And even if they're replicating an icon they've done before, there's going to be a difference in the next one.
Absolutely.
And in a way, that icon represents a point of your life that you're giving to someone. And I think that is special.
Yeah.
Now, the only artistic talent I have is cooking. So the way I would relate this, if I'm fixing a meal for someone that I really care about, well, first of no meals I ever cook are exactly like the last one I cooked. Yep. So same sort of thing.
That's right.
But I'm pouring everything into that to make sure it is what that person wants. And so you can't replicate that by either a printed icon or McDonald's,
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas if you're making it for me, it's going to be Sloppy Joe.
No, you're so right though, because if you get a printed icon, and again, if you have a printed icon, be blessed. Yeah. That's great.
Yes.
But your icon looks exactly like the other 975,000 icons that were printed just like that. So on the one hand, and as a person who very much appreciates being unique, when you have a handcrafted icon, you have something that was made for you and for your, and like I said, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. I want my icons to last for generations. And so you have something that is not only unique, but will be yours for a long time. But there's also, you said it so, like, that's so right. When I'm making an icon, I'm making it for that person. And there's a certain amount of, sacrifice. I could be doing other things than writing an icon. I could be playing with my kids. I could be reading a book. I could be sleeping. Like, there's other things. And that sacrificial act of love through art is a way to bless others. And so when you receive an icon that's been made by an artist, whether it's me or somebody else, you are receiving an act of love that's specifically to help you grow in your faith. Like, I don't want icons to be in people's homes just so that they have pretty wall decor. I want like we have an icon of St. Bridget, and my son is going to lament that I don't have time to tell the story, but we have an icon in our house of St. Bridget. And I cannot tell you how many nights when everybody else has gone to bed and I'm having a bad day or I'm having a bad night, and I've knelt down at the icon of St. Bridget and I've said, St. Bridget, I'm in a bad way. I need help. I need you to pray with me. Will you please just pray with me for a time? That's what an icon should be. And so when I'm making an icon for somebody, that's what I envision, is that, like, hey, when you need prayer, when you need help, when you need intercession, here's this beautiful sacramental that's meant to help you in those arenas. So yeah, there's a whole lot of difference.
I think what you were just talking about is so important for us to explain to people why, as Catholics, we have statues, we have icons, because no Catholic is going to believe that the icon is the saint. No Catholic's going to believe that statue is the saint. What it does do is provide us a focus to remind us that that saint is there.
Right. And that's one of my great it's one of the things about the Protestant misunderstanding of Catholicism is that iconography is in no way, shape, form, or fashion idolatry. So if you're Catholic and you're listening and you think, oh, I don't want to partake in idolatry. Congratulations, iconography is not that. Yeah, idolatry is this idea of taking power and bringing it down, centralized to my use. Iconography is about being drawn in and up, away from yourself, into the reality of who God is. Right? It's Saint Theodore the Studite, as an 8th century theologian, and he writes on iconography all the time. He's saying, and his point was always that the icon is the copy of the prototype. It's not the prototype. It's not, when I look at my icon of St. Patrick, I'm not looking at the St. Patrick. I'm looking at the thing that points me to St. Patrick. It is a holy image of the one to whom I would love to look on if I were in the kingdom of heaven. Yeah, there's a huge difference.
Yes. And I think when we talk about idols, an idol is always an effort of man to create their own God. That is not what iconography is.
Not even close.
We already know who God is.
Right.
And he has nothing to do with that image other than he inspires that image. That is not God.
Right.
But it reminds us God is there.
That's right. That's why we say that icons are windows into heaven.
Yes.
It's not the thing that I look at and stop. It's the thing I look at and continue on. I'm looking into heaven to see what reality looks like, to see what virtue looks like, to see what love looks like. It's not this thing that I'm trying to appease to get something from. It's actually this thing to which I'm trying to partake in.
Which brings us back to when we were talking about transcendental. True art, true beauty always moves us beyond that art, that beauty, toward something greater.
Yes.
And so that's exactly what an icon does. When I look at that icon and I am mesmerized by that image, I'm not stuck with the image.
That's right.
I'm moving beyond that image to what it represents. On your website, you say that you are a husband, a dad, an artist, a missionary, a poet, and a teacher. Of those, which gives you the greatest enjoyment in life?
Oh, being a dad and husband, 100%. I could do any of the other things or
Good
not
save
do.
there by adding husband.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, they go together. That's how the marriage works. I love you, dear. No, I could not do any of those other things. I could do those other things. Being a husband and being a dad man, if we had more time, I'd even tell you the story about how we came to be having children. And it's beautiful, just the way that God works. But no, I love being a dad. I could work at Lowe's tomorrow, and if I've got my wife and my kids, I'm good.
I think that you were talking earlier about that you would like your icons to basically last forever.
Yeah.
But I think also that, with having a family, and this is the wonderful thing, is that your experience as an iconographer informs the lives of your family also.
Yeah.
And so that art, that beauty has meaning in your family, even though the icon you might be painting isn't not for you, it's going out, but it's part of your life. And that part of your life, and especially you were talking about, art and low points in your life, being able to lift you out of it. That what I'm trying to get at is all those roles in your life intermingle. Mm-hmm. And so I think that when we find a purpose that God has for us, like in your case, art, it informs everything else that we do and raises the bar on it.
It really does.
We talked a little bit about this, but one of the purpose of an icon is to teach. That's, again, why we write icons.
That's right.
How do they do that?
I think there's a couple of different ways. I think icons in part are meant to be connected with story. And it's the story, I think, that's the part of what teaches. But even in just the little components that go into an icon. So whether it's the halo, whether it's the way the light plays off the face. So like, and one of the things in iconography is when you're working in when you're working in one of the traditional mediums, so like egg tempera, you always work from dark to light. You start with all the darks and then you add the lights on. And that's this idea that in the beginning, we start out as kind of dark creatures. And as we progress in our spirituality and as we move closer to Christ, more of that darkness goes away and more of Christ's light shines through us. So you don't see, in an icon, you won't see cast shadows. So in an icon where Christ is holding a Bible or a saint is holding a Bible, you won't see that Bible cast a shadow, because in heaven there is no shadow. There's only light and its effects on form. And but even little things like halos or names, sometimes you'll see in a Christ icon the I am, right? Christ is God. He is God. He is not the Father. He is the Son, and He's not the Spirit. He is the Son, and the Spirit is not. It's like the Saint Ambrose's Saint Ambrose's creed. It blows my mind. But the idea is that when you look onto an icon, you're getting to see all these little symbols, and everything about an icon is meant to tell you something. The way the robes hang, the way the face is tilted, the way the hand is making certain. So one of my favorites is when you look at a Christ icon, you'll see most of the time he's doing a blessing hand, but it looks like this. So you've got, for those of you listening, you got your first finger pointed up. You can look at him online. He's actually making the symbol of his name, ICXC, and he's blessing you with his name. And that by itself is like Christ loves you to the point where He blesses you with His own name. He blesses you with His presence. And so, every part of an icon should be giving you some form of spiritual reality and informing you on those realities.
Now we're almost at the end of the show, have a little over 4 minutes left. So say someone's interested in having you write an icon for them. Where would they get a hold of you?
So the easiest way to get a hold of me is my website, GarrettHines.com. GarrettHines.com. There's a contact page on there. The reason I do it that way is because the email communication that comes through helps me to figure out what is it that you want to commission, and then what unique things can I be praying about for you, and then we sort out the details that way. You can also, on that website, you can see examples of past commissions that other people have done. That way I can say, hey, we're going to do this, but it looks kind of like this icon that you see on my website, and that might help with the robes and the colors and the different things. I'm also on, shake my head when I say it, but I'm on the different social media platforms. I am on Instagram and Facebook. I run a little bitty YouTube channel called Father's Lion Studio. That's the name of my studio. And on there, I talk about the Catholic faith through the lens of an artist's take on beauty. So my website, though, if you're interested in commissioning an icon, you go to my website, shoot me a message through the contact page, and we'll roll from there.
How did it feel the first time someone asked you to actually write an icon for them?
Oh man, that I will never forget that experience, because, well, I'll say the first one that impacted me in a very different way. There had been a couple of commissions that people did from our local parish, and those were beautiful and those were wonderful and they were meaningful. But the first time somebody from outside of our parish reached out and said, hey, I've seen your work, I'd like to commission an icon, that was like, oh man, this is broader than I thought it might ever be. And that anytime, and I still get the same feeling every time a person commissions an icon, I get that feeling of like, wow, you work really hard to do what it is that you do in the world, and you've decided to take some of those green slips of appreciation that you get at your job and pay for the commissioning of a piece of art that I get to make for you. It's deeply humbling, because I would not be doing this were it not for the direct act of God to make me as I am. And for you to recognize that what God is doing in and through me, and want to participate and invest in that, and to receive an icon that I've been given the opportunity to create, it's a very humbling and honoring thing. And so every time I get a commission, I'm like, oh man, we're gonna going to do it again. All right, let's go, Jesus. You know, like we're going to do this thing another time. How cool is that? So the first one, it was just, oh, wow, we're really doing this. I thought I was kind of playing, and then people got really interested. And it's like, oh, the Lord's doing something here that I never. I mean, if you just sat me down 20 years ago and said, hey, by the way, you're gonna be a professional artist and you're gonna be Catholic, I'd be like, neither of those can be true. I never could have imagined that this art form would be the one that I'm most passionate about. But I love it. Iconography is a rare thing.
Well, especially for someone that comes from Church of Christ, and now not only are you Catholic, but you're actually writing icons, which is about as Catholic as you can get.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. I never it's just, man, to get to participate in the story of God and like see how he moves. There's not a great way to describe it. It's like, oh man, the Lord really did some stuff and I get to be a part of that. That's awesome.
Which is a reminder that God has a plan for all of us, and we have no idea how it's going to turn out.
That is 100% correct.
Again, website GarrettHines.com. And Garrett, thank you so much for doing this show. I learned a lot. I hope our listeners learned a lot also. And I hope people will consider contacting you and saying, hey, write an icon for me.
I'd love it.
Here's my prayer.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you get to pick colors and stuff like that. So, all right, we're going to be back on the other side with part 2. So stay tuned. Don't go away. We'll be right back.